this on?
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the FTTC podcast, sponsored by Tower Road Landfill. No matter how bad your draft, Tower Road can handle your trash. We are your home for breaking news and breaking balls in the fantasy sports world. From touchdowns to tailgates, we've got it all covered with a dash of witty banter. I'm your host, Jason Stankiewicz, and I'm joined here today by a two-time second-place finisher, including last season's runner-up, the Mountain Man, Mr. Dan Zay. Dan, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Ready to redeem myself after a pretty shitty finals appearance last year. And I'm going to be looking at some, I think some people that have served some jail time as the foundation of my team. Maybe Deshaun Watson, Kareem Hunt, Alvin Kamara. I'm thinking we're going to go with the bad guys this year. What do you think of that, Jason?
I like it. A little bad guys team. I think you got plenty of options. You know, there's no shortage of criminals in the NFL.
Yeah. Just don't tell the girlfriend.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Let's kick things off with recap last season. You touched on it a little bit. We touched on it a little bit in your intro as well. You finished 9-5. You were projected to finish first following the draft. You basically met expectations. Honestly, had a pretty solid year. Despite not winning the regular season title or the playoff title, would you say you were satisfied with your performance?
You know, you always want to win, Jason. So absolutely not. You go into the season wanting to win some money, and I think I probably could have managed the team a little bit better. I feel like our commissioner is always finagling his teams and overperforming, or at least that's what he says he does in the group meets. And I think I could have improved there, but overall, I thought it was okay. You can't complain with a second place finish, but looking to do better this year.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, that was your second place finish, with the other coming back in 2018. Do you think that you have any frustration over the lack of the ability to close out a season, and do you think that a title's coming your way soon?
I have a lack of ability to close in a lot of areas of my life. I don't really know how I even have a relationship right now. It's something I have to work on. I scheduled a therapy session after last year's second place loss. I've been really working on it. Some tools that will help me close, both in other parts of my life, but also finishing in the bedroom.
That is a very important aspect of not only your life, but keeping your girlfriend satisfied. So, but you got to make sure to work on that.
You haven't said that. So we're working on it.
All right, let's talk about the title last year, because that was obviously a little bit contentious. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the title plays out coming down to basically the final set of games with the Bills and the Bengals, and obviously the DeMar Hamlin situation happens when you're down 2 points, and I think you had Joe Mixon running. Now, take me through kind of your thoughts on how you ended up settling a winner, and if you're happy or not with the end result.
I have to give a big shout out to Brian Durante. He was an ultimate professional handling the situation. I think in terms of the payouts and all that. So it was a really disappointing situation. I don't think, I don't know. I mean, you can't even make that up. Game stops. You have a running back that obviously is going to win. But I'm going to take the high road here, and glad DeMar Hamlin's okay, and saw he made the 53-man roster. But yeah, so honestly, it was disappointing. Would have loved to have a first place trophy, but can't really predict. Joe Mixon could have torn his ACL in the last first play of the game. So it's just sometimes it's up to luck.
Yeah, and I will say feedback so far has been very generous towards you in terms of the way that things ended, and people have felt that it was a very kind of admirable decision to allow Brian the ability to have the title last year. But let's move away from last year a little bit and move into some kind of off-season training regimen type stuff. So, there's been a fair bit of criticism in the media over your squad's kind of off-season preparedness in the past, and it particularly caught the eye of the commissioner. He was a little hard on you in last season's owners meeting. Do you feel you've implemented some successful changes to get the team back on track?
Well, I think I just heard the commissioner's ego a little bit, because he tried to call me out, if you don't remember, putting me on on probation. I basically just said, okay, I'll drop out of the league. And I think it took him back a little bit. So, obviously our commish puts a lot of value, his own value into this league. We all really appreciate his input. But as you can see with his announcement of not going to be relinquishing power until 2040, he might put a little bit too much of his self-esteem into this league. So I was really happy that I kind of got to him and devaluing the league a little bit. But at the same time, I definitely need to increase my participation and preparedness. And, first owners league participation this past year, loved seeing the boys in anticipation for the draft. And hopefully it translate into some results. But I think I'm going to translate that into my draft and getting some bad boys, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, Deshaun Watson. I might even go to jail before the league starts in preparation.
Well, cool. That's a perfect segue to move on to our draft segment here. So, we've been looking back at your past drafts here, and for the past 5 years, you've gone running, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, the first 4 picks. Obviously, a heavy emphasis on loading up at skill positions there. Any particular reason for this strategy, or you just feel kind of it's the optimal build for your lineup?
That's a really good question. I think what I'm most excited about for this year is I think I have the highest pick I've ever had. I think one of the reasons why I've drafted skill positions just where I've fallen in the draft. I try to focus on value a little bit, but I don't know. I think it might be with the importance of quarterbacks running the football. It might be time to break strategy and not focus so much on the skill positions, but try to solidify myself with some of the game-changing quarterbacks or a tight end that can win the league. But I do want to mention I think I traded for Travis Kelce last year, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember, but you sometimes realize that you need one of those guys to put you over the top.
Yeah, I mean, you did snag Mahomes in the 5th round last year, so that was obviously quite a steal, and you partner him up with Travis Kelce, and that's a great stack for you. I was looking back, and I think one of the more interesting things that I saw in your draft history was 2018, you had Odell Beckham in the 1st round, 2019, Odell Beckham in the 2nd round, and 2020, Odell Beckham in the 3rd round. So you're pretty high on Beckham for a while, but clearly that's not the case anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you blow out your knee 3 times. It's going to dampen your value, but hopefully he can get back to being his old self.
All right, so you drafted in the 2 hole this year. Justin Jefferson is the presumed number 1. Whether the commissioner actually takes him or not, we wait to see. I got to ask you, put you on the spot a little bit. Are you leaning any which way with where you might go with the number 2 pick?
Deshaun Watson.
That might be the answer to my next question. All right, I can tell you're not willing to give too much away with regard to draft strategy, but let's talk about who we think is going to make the worst pick in the draft. There's always a couple people up there. Some people toss out some pretty wild reaches, but who do you think makes the worst pick?
Funny you should ask. I have a draft in another league, and the worst pick that was made in that draft was actually myself, picking Jonathan Taylor in the 3rd round before the announcement that he wasn't traded. So I think the advantage of this draft is that we do it so late, so everything's kind of settled on people's teams. But I'm going to go with, let's see. I'm going to go with the person that drafts Christian McCaffrey first. Very injury prone. I don't think he's going to make it through a full season. That was an anomaly last year. Just really thinking that Coco is going to choose Christian McCaffrey and not leave it to the 2nd pick in the draft. I'm going to go with that.
I like that. Piling the pressure on the commissioner. He's got a lot on his shoulders with that number 1 pick, and nobody's really sure which way he's going to go. But let's move on to the upcoming season overall. So a couple questions for you as it relates to more real-world NFL, and then we'll talk about our league independently. 2 predictions I'm going to ask from you. First, who do you think ends up scoring the most fantasy points and is the de facto fantasy MVP? And then who do you got in the Super Bowl?
So the most fantasy points, I'm going to go with I'm going to go with Jalen Hurts. I think quarterback always has the highest points totals, if I'm not mistaken. So love the leap he made last year, and I think it's only going to continue with his ability to rush as well. I think he's got a pretty outrageous number of he's almost like, we want Justin Fields to be like that as Bears fans, right? So he's a kind of that dual threat. Yeah, they don't really have a great running back, so he's going to be in kind of as a running back of the committee there. I think he's going to get a lot of rushing touchdowns this year again.
Yeah, I mean, he's bigger around the goal line for sure. Real Jamal Williams type character almost. It's pretty crazy how effective they are from a yard or two out. What about the Super Bowl? Who you got going?
It's a good question. I'm going to go with the Arizona Cardinals.
Okay, might be interesting. I'm not sure they have a quarterback yet, but
I think
maybe Kyler comes back and leaves the glory.
Yeah, Zeppy is looking pretty good for that wire choice. So I think he's going to be the new Tom Brady, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, all right. Well, an interesting call for sure. Let's talk a little bit about our league again. So, you never want to be in a circle of shame. You never want to have to run a season-long podcast. Who do you think is going to finish last?
I'm going to go with Billy. I think Billy's going to finish last this year.
Yeah. I would like to see it. He was pretty cocky in his interviews. I think he claimed that he was going to take home the title with supreme confidence. So wouldn't hate seeing that.
I think he's been a little bit too much of Australian soccer and not doing enough fantasy football research before the draft. He's going to make a couple mistakes, rely too heavily on some big names that aren't going to produce this year. And ultimately, I don't know what the punishment is, but he's probably going to have to eat his own words and sit with Winnie the Pooh at a reservation at a steakhouse in Chicago.
I mean, I'd love to see it, and I think you're right. His head might not be in the right place. It seems pretty deep in like the second and third leagues of South American soccer and Australian soccer, as you mentioned. So, we'll see where he ends up. But on the other side, maybe he'll come at it with the same type of confidence that Billy had. But whose turn is it to take home the title?
I think we're going to go worst to first with the man, Jason Stankiewicz.
Hey, I appreciate that. That means a lot to me.
I think it's just a matter of it's you're due. You're due. A lot of stinky teams, and I think being so invested in this podcast, you're going to be the most prepared for the draft, most up to date with waiver wires. I think it's actually going to play to your advantage this year.
I'm really hoping to be pretty on top of some inside information too. Hopefully get some nice tidbits from people, but it means a lot to me that you put me up there for that. But let's talk about, you got a weekly basis. On a weekly basis, obviously there's a punishment for whoever finishes with the least points. Who you got for the fastest shotgun this year, and who's going to end up doing the most shotguns?
Fastest shotgun is definitely not Billy, but I'm going to go most shotguns will be Billy after he's going to lose the league. It's going to be really funny to watch him give an update on why his team did so bad and also why he lost so much money gambling. That's really what I'm looking forward to. I kind of want an update there from him as well as he's updating himself on the team, on his poor performance by his team. Fastest shotgun. I think Steve Blazer is pretty fast with the shotgun, so I'm going to go fastest time Steve Blazer.
Yeah, Steve definitely has a quick draw. I think he's been the most popular answer so far, and honestly, he's probably the favorite. All right, a few minutes left. Let's move on to our last segment. I got a few rumors that are floating around out in the fantasy world that I'm hoping I can get some comment from you on. The first one you touched on a little bit earlier, but obviously the commissioner made the announcement that he's potentially going to stick around until 2040 when he might look to step down. There's been a couple, people have had some interesting takes on that so far. We've gotten one dictator Kokoris type comment. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on, the rumors of the commissioner potentially stepping down in 17 years.
I mean, usually how a ownership structure works is that the commissioner needs, over 50% or over, I think, 2/3 of the vote. So I'm just very disappointed in the commissioner. Again, he puts a lot of self-worth into the league and thinks he can make these decisions unilaterally. But But ultimately, I think this should have went to a vote and maybe institute some yearly feedback on how we can make the league better. I mean, there's a lot of performance-related issues and lack of transparency in these decisions that's causing a lot of frustration. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but obviously a long time away. Next rumor around the commissioner as well. He's obviously sitting there with the pick ahead of you. Commissioner ending up with the first pick. You think there's any funny business going on there?
Absolutely. I do think he had another window open and paused his share screen and swapped it for him to get first place. As someone in sales, it's actually pretty easy to do. And I know Coco's had a lot of training on that, being in sales as well. So, I think there's a lot of pressure for him to win the league. He's one of those guys that always has to manage his team to the playoffs. Pretty much his drafts are underperformed. So I think he's trying to put himself in a good position to start out fast, which he never does.
All right, last one for you, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Any thoughts on Mr. Steve Blazer's delay in doing his NBA G League tryout?
Honestly, I'm more on I'm more in Steve's camp in terms of the actual G League tryout. What I am most disappointed for is that we, as a league, haven't found him an alternative punishment to do over the last 3 or 4 years, which I put the blame on the commissioner. He's got to, if he wants to just, unilaterally make himself the commissioner for 2040 without asking permission or going to a vote with the owners, I think he needs to hold himself accountable when he can't make an owner do his punishment, regardless, whether it's the G League or something else. So, I'm really looking for some leadership and trying to get him to figure out a solution here.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've heard all the thoughts from Mr. Danzay. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck in the draft and the upcoming season. And, hopefully this could be the first year that you end up snagging that title.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, it's great to be here. And good luck to you adding a couple hours of work to your week podcast. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll do our best to keep the league informed. But until next time, everybody.